All right, guys, welcome back to the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. I'm your host, John Heck. Okay, I'm really psyched about the guest that we have on today. This guy, most of you are very familiar with him. He is the man I consider to be my single biggest mentor as a coach in strength and conditioning. I credit so much of my coaching philosophy and just, what I've learned as far as the business side of strength and conditioning, how to conduct myself as a professional. I credit to this man. He's an absolute innovator, one of the most legendary strength and conditioning coaches in all of sports performance. Joe Big House Kenn, welcome to the podcast.
Big John, I appreciate you having me. I'm pretty jacked up about your new journeys. I'm super jacked that you're a dad and you and Dee are going to kill it. And I'm even happier you're moving back to North Carolina.
Yeah, they're back.
Out of me, and thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, this is surreal for me. So, quick little story. So, when I was on my way to interview with you for that season-long intern spot at Carolina, the first time I'd ever heard your voice was on a podcast, and I just took a visit at East Tennessee State, met with the Stones, and I was considering getting into a master's program for strength and conditioning, and then I drove from there to Charlotte, where I was going to do my interview with you. And the way there, I was pulling up all your podcasts. I was just trying to be prepared, study. I was so nervous for that thing. So to have you on my podcast now, 8 or 9 years later, it's surreal for me. It's kind of full circle. So I'm a little bit nervous for this one, honestly. I mean, you and I have known each other for so long, but man, I want to do this thing justice.
Don't worry about it, Big John. You've come a long way, and I'm super proud. You could only, when me and you started, I mean, that was the very beginning of your journey. And, and again, like anything else, I mean, your story tells a different story than most. I mean, I wouldn't say there was pressure on you, but I mean, the Heck name in football is big. Like, your brother was a little bit behind you, but he was dominating college, and your dad is, I've known of your dad's name since I was college, because we came up at the same years when he was at Notre Dame and I was Wake Forest. So, I think that, and then when you have, like I say, I don't think you traded off your dad's name, but kind of like my son Peter, you're who you are and who you're affiliated with helps you get in the door. You've got to close the door. And I think, with your dad's relationship with some people I knew, it kind of was an easy fit for me to say, man, let me take a swing. The guy's right up the road. We're not losing anything. And we had a position open. And then, I resonated with you right away because you were like, yeah, I'm done playing ball. I just want to lift weights. I was like, I know a guy kind of like that when he was finishing up football in college too. And similar, we had some injuries that probably would have possibly, again, I always tell people, I'm not going to look back and say anything that, oh, well, my injuries cost me a chance to be in the league. I think my injuries cost me a chance to get cut. And I think people don't understand when I say that. It's like, and because you've worked in the NFL and you've played major college football, I don't look at getting cut as a negative. I look at it like you had a chance to be there. And how many of your teammates could say now, as they get older and start families, well, I'd rather have gotten cut than never got there at all.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, people would kill just for the opportunity to be cut. And so few ever get that opportunity. And you're right. I mean, there was a little bit of pressure on me. I had made the decision to step away from football. I was betting on myself, and I wanted to pursue what I was actually passionate about, carve out my own path. But at the same time, my dad was a respected name in the NFL. I was getting my shot at the NFL, and you've got to represent the family name, because if I go out there and look like a jackass, well, that's a smear on the Heck name. So it was always very important to me to bring respect and honor to the family name, but simultaneously to separate myself and not be seen as Andy Heck's son, but to be seen as John Heck, the strength and conditioning coach. And that's always been important to me. And I know you feel the same with Pete, and he's off killing it, doing his own thing over at SMU. He's an incredible strength and conditioning coach himself. But look, so you've done a million of these podcasts, and we talked off the air. I don't want to bore you and make you have to go through your whole bio, life story, the same shit you've talked about on 100 podcasts. And for those listening, You can go out there, you go on YouTube, you go on Spotify, you can listen to 100 podcasts where House has been on there, told his entire story, gone through his come up, all of his stops and strength and conditioning along the way. I mean, you've dominated in the collegiate setting, you've dominated in the NFL. You were National Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year in both college and NFL. You're a huge innovator. You brought the tier system into the fold. You're a published author. You've had success in the private sector. You played ball at a high level at Wake Forest. So I mean, as far as a resume, the clout, I mean, you've got it all. So anyway, point is, I don't want to sit here and go through all that. I want to talk about today's NFL, today's status of NFL strength and conditioning, these new high performance medical models, so to speak. Talk a little bit about collegiate strength and conditioning. How has the transfer portal and all those new dynamics affected the way that we program? So, I mean, it's a broad topic. We'll kind of just go through where the conversation takes us. But overall, House, do you feel like NFL strength and conditioning is in a better place now than it's been in the past, or has it gone astray?
Yeah, how do I add to that? I think it's definitely in a point of transition, and I don't know where that transition is going to lead us. I really believe, and I've said this several times now out loud, in a lot of ways, they've taken the strengths out of strength and conditioning in the NFL. I think that we have leaned too much on individuals coming into the National Football League because people in higher levels of hiring think they need to bring in someone of relevancy outside of the sport. Those people don't know the sport, but yet they control and dictate what people at what I call the ground level positions of the support staff and the service staff to the athlete, and they have no understanding of what those roles actually are. And I don't think that it goes back to people are always in the NFL. They don't want to be last. Whoever's first is the one who sets the trend, but no one wants to be last. So everybody all of a sudden jumps on the bandwagon and tries to figure out how can we better the next guy without really understanding what are we trying to hire and what the process is. And that leads to, again, there's a lot of elephants in the room, as you know, and as the staffs have grown and elitism in subject matter has grown, that the support staff has grown in numbers to a point where everybody wants to be the alpha, everybody wants to be the boss, and there's only could be one boss. And to control the controllable, so to speak, is really unheard of in the NFL because there's too many people trying to jockey for those positions, if that makes sense.
100%.
When you're in it, I always say, my perspective being in it, I think was fairly on the upswing, like trying to stay ahead of the curve and learning from situations that I was in personally, trying to look at it from what the GM may see, what the president may see, what the owner may see, what the head ball coach may see. But when you're away from it now for as long as I've been, and now I can see the vision of the entire 32 teams instead of worrying about the team I work for and worry about the 3 other teams in my division who I have to beat to get to the playoffs. Because we know as former NFL strength coaches, first and foremost, you got to get to the playoffs. The easiest way to do that is to win your division. So you're only focusing on a small minute. Then once you get to the playoffs, it expands a little bit. And then the ultimate goal is to win a Super Bowl, which is extremely hard. There's 4 teams left, and they're pretty close in the way they train. Like if you look at certain things, when you go back to that, I don't think it's a what's the right word? I don't think. Well, let's see. When I look at let me backtrack. When I look at the 4 teams, here's what I can tell you. There's a lot of old school belief in those 4 teams that are left. I think they practice hard. I think for the most part, they lift a little different than some of the other teams in the league. And I thought that last week with the 8 teams left, with a little bit different, maybe the Rams with how Coach McVay runs a little bit of his practices, but the other 7 teams led to me a little bit more towards the so I think that it's a combination of a lot of things that are going on. I think that there's positives to me across the board. There's 100% positives on increasing the expertise in the service and support staff roles. Meaning, I've said this in several presentations I've been doing now and talking to other coaches and administrators on my belief system on the high performance model in sport, in particular football. Everybody, and here's just a brief history. What people have to understand is 99.9% of the people in the NFL have some type of alpha mentality. They want to be that dog, whether it's male, female, doesn't matter what role. From the nutritionist to the mental health and wellness department to anybody who has a department head type role, they got to have some really fortitude and resiliency to them, and they want to prove their value to upper management. So when the support staff started, and we're just talking specifically right now football, there was the athletic trainer. And really, trainer was a name that is very generic when you really look at it, but that person at that time, mostly a male-dominated field, that person did everything. Whatever that coach needed from a support staff, it fell on one individual. There was the beginning of the support staff was the athletic trainer. Then throughout the years, as we know, the story goes, all of a sudden, lifting weights doesn't stunt your speed and your size. It can actually improve it. Well, maybe that can help these people be better football players. Let's hire a strength and conditioning coach. Well, now there's 2 people in this department. One who started it, and now a second person. Now the question becomes the jockeying for position. It's just, I call it there's animosity everywhere, but now start who's got the juice, right? Like who's got direct input, who ranks higher than others. So it becomes a depth chart thing. And this is not to be any disrespectful to either profession or either career choice. It's just facts. I mean, you've lived it on both the colleges and the pros. This isn't about necessarily you liking someone personally but it's just the knack of what happens when people have alpha mentalities. They want to be that individual. So at this point in time, the trainer did everything, and now the strength coach comes in, and he or she has a unique, specific role. But yet, both of these individuals still had to be the psychologist, because as you know, I'm sure there's been plenty of times a player comes in your office and shuts the door and feels like you're the one he can talk to.
Right.
You're doing sports science, which I call analytics and analyzing, whether it's analyzing movement potential with return to play stuff and coming off injuries, whether it's analyzing play time and rest time. I mean, I laugh all the time. I've got charts from 1997 of us literally having stopwatches, and we time play time, rest times at games at Boise State. Now that's called sports science. What I call that was trying to condition guys at a specific demands of a game.
Right.
So we had to be the nutritionist, right? We had to be all these things in the one. And as we learned over time, you can only be an expert in one thing. You might be able to subcategorize things. Like I always tell strength coaches, hey, I want you to be a great strength coach, but what's your niche? Like yours is nutrition, right? Some people's is sports science. Brett Neighbor for us, he gravitated to sports science, and I thought he was the best football sports science guy, if you want to call it that, or evaluator of the GPS data that's out there, because he was an American football player doing football player data.
Right.
So I've had people who could Brian Dermody when I was at Louisville. Nobody dissected the functional movement screen like him. Our screening system that we had, which he helped develop at Iowa, was second to none at Louisville. And then, so everybody has, what's their way. Some just are great strength coaches and don't need a niche. They understand how to attack the room and they understand the game, and their leadership capabilities are so good that you're that guy, right? Like, so as the expertise comes, now what happens next? Nutrition becomes big, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you've gotten strength coaches who are doing secondary degrees in nutrition. But now it comes to a point where the athletic administration goes, we need registered dietitians with a sport nutrition background.
Right.
Well, now here comes number 3. I really believe in my model, because I've watched enough over the years at every level how demanding the athletic training job is, the toughest job of all the jobs that I will name, because no one understands the amount of paperwork that falls behind that job. And remember, for as many hours as a strength coach works, the trainer has to be there even before that, because if we train at 6 and we get there at 5:30, we're setting up the room, but they got to actually get there at 5, because at 5:30, athletes are going to start trickling into the training room, whether it's hot tub, cold tub. They might need to get their ankles taped or do some type of warm up or rehab stuff before they come to the field. So their job is extremely demanding. And I've always said, even, at the pro level, I would have to think more and more people, they need like insurance secretaries just to help and to take some of the stress off of them. But I highly recommend that within this, what I call a horizontal hierarchy model of department heads, you need a director of rehabilitation that specifically has the capabilities of training the long-term return to play, post-surgical repaired athlete.
Right.
I think there's certain things that the athletic trainer can still monitor from acute level things, or some small soft tissue work, but the long-term rehabilitation care should fall under another department. That's just my opinion based off of my experiences and looking at health and wellness of those individuals who work in those departments, not only the athlete. Then you have what I call performance analytics, what people call sports science. Generally, all that really is is evaluating data, and some of that data is return to play. We're using force plates and certain parameters in technology that can change of direction, step balances, landing impacts, as well as your velocity-based work, if you believe in that, in the weight room. And then the biggest thing is the GPS tracking, high-speed demands, how you do your A cells, total high speed running over 80 or 90%.
Right.
And at the college level, that stuff's gold, because you got them 365 days a year. At the pro level, I think what we have to do a better job of is, because I think we are taking too much load off these athletes in practice, and that's why we see too many injuries still. I think we've overlooked what happens in practice. You have to practice hard. I believe the teams that are practicing hard are the teams that are still playing. I'm not traveling and visiting schools. I'm just basing it based off of what I hear on how people use player load to rest and pull back volume of practice.
Right.
When people had differentiated smart and hard and separated those two words, that's when the issues became. Science was supposed to improve the game. What I call analytics is supposed to improve the game, and I don't think it's improved the game. I think it's changed the game, and because of the way the physicality of the game has changed, as far as the type of hits that are being applied, the game is a more speed game. So you're going to see more high-speed collisions when it's allowed, and you're going to see more types of non-contact injuries, because most of these athletes now are training like sprinters because of this max velocity conundrum we're on, and they're not training enough like pure football players. I think there's a lot of that's happening with a lot of off-season plans. And then finally, you have the health and wellness part, where you have to have some you have to have a health and wellness professional who understands the performance end and the personal end. So that group there could be 3 or 4 deep of specialists, whether it's a cognitive behavior psychologist, somebody who is a 100% understands emotional quotient, and then those who understand some of the mental performance capabilities to enhance performance, visualization, meditation. So I don't think you can find one person that could do all of that great. So I think that particular group could be maybe a bigger build out than some of the others. And then as I've been continuing to talk, especially in the NFL model, so that's my 6 big ones. And but in the NFL model, I don't know if you shouldn't count player engagement. Those are individuals, because one, they're former players. And as you know, as a former player, a guy will go to them before they go to the health and wellness psychologist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they know what they've been through, and the NFL is a fraternity within the fraternity. Like for guys like us, we played college football at a high level in way different eras, but you don't bring up you played college football in an NFL locker room. That's like playing Pop Warner. Like, don't ever say when I played, because they're gonna go, when'd you play? And they don't mean it disrespectfully. It's like, yo, bro, I played that level too. That ain't the same as the NFL. And they're right. I watched enough NFL to know, yeah, the level I played out's high, but it ain't that high. So I look at this thing totally different than I did as a practicing strength coach in the NFL, because although I was trying to learn what was going on, you have to be focused at the task at hand. And then within that, depending on how your program works, certain strength coaches at certain teams have different responsibilities. Mine was very direct. This is what they wanted me to do. I did it to the best of my abilities. Toward the end of my career, I'm not going to sit here and lie to anybody. Things kind of got a little flustered across the board. I think everybody could say, I know where I was at fault. I know how I would dress things differently. But the truth was that what they were asking me to do was not a challenge anymore. I know where I rank as a programmer. I know where I rank as a leader. I know where I rank with innovation in the weight room. I knew how to deal with the 14, 15, 16, 17-year vet, and I knew how to work with the practice squad old lineman who couldn't squat. So for me, it became a point of, I need challenges. I've always needed challenges. If I didn't want to accept the challenge, I'd have been at Boise State from 1991 to 2025. So for me, it was time. And again, because you were involved in a couple of moves that I was trying to make towards the end of my NFL career. It wasn't that I wanted to leave the NFL. It was that I needed a change of scenery for myself to reset. And no one wants to leave the NFL. You know that. It's extremely hard to get there. Like even in your case, there's not a lot of jobs in the NFL to be an assistant strength coach. It's an elite job. And then to be a head strength coach, there's 32 jobs in the whole world. You want to be a Division I college strength coach, there's 135 of those. You want to be a Power 4 strength coach, what is there, 64 of those? You want to be a $500,000 strength coach, what are there, 20 of those? Come on, these are elitist jobs. So you be thankful you had one, and then people need to understand they just don't give these away. And when you got one, you don't really want to leave it. So that's it. So I think that, to me, the issue is, how do you create this model of these 6 to 7 people with the understanding that it's a level playing field, and it could be much level in the NFL than in college. Let's just face it. College, the strength coach got the juice.
Right.
Whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, every friggin' football coach in the world in college, what's the first thing out of their mind? Strength coach. Strength coach. Fairly so. Like, I'm not saying this, I'm just saying a lot of generalization, but if a football coach this day and age gets a Power 5 job or a Power 4 job in college, a lot of times in this day and age, that strength coach is on the plane with him to his introductory press conference.
Yeah.
In the NFL, you're probably, if they are allowed to hire, a lot of times, the strength coach is separated from the coaching staff at a lot of these teams now. So they might not even make a change because it's under the GM, or it's under the sports science, or it's under athletic training, or whatever it's called. They might not even be able to make a change. But if it's made by the coach, generally that's the last hire they need to make, because it's not as important, so to speak, because of the way the rules are. So that's another thing you got to look at.
Yeah, that's a great point because, in my most recent stop in the NFL, the entire performance department they were not coaches. They were not hired by the head football coach. They were all under the general manager. And I mean, the head strength and conditioning coach there made it through 4 different head coaching changes because it was it was the same general manager who was there. And just, talking about you talked about the alpha males and kind of that maybe there's a few too many cooks in the kitchen type thing. Like when I worked for you, it was a simple structure. It was the strength and conditioning staff, where it was you, it was Jason Bengucci, who kind of specialized with the outside the box position groups, quarterbacks, Brett Neighbor, who had the sports science, the GPS niche, myself, the season-long intern. Then there was the sports med staff, and then there's Jen Brunelli, who was the nutritionist. And correct me if I'm wrong, she wasn't even a full-time team nutritionist. She was kind of that third party.
Yeah,
consultant.
Or she had just come on as full time.
Okay, yeah.
When we first hired her, she came on as a consultant, and then as it grew and that importance started to become more of the norm in the NFL, by the time she left, she was a full-time employee.
Well, point being, it was a smaller performance staff. It was simple, but it was highly effective. But then, my recent stop with the Houston Texans, I get there and there's a strength and conditioning department. There is a sports science department. There is a nutrition department with 3 RDs on it. There's the whole sports medicine staff. There's the return to play department, which and the RTP department. It's got its department head, and it's got multiple PTs underneath who are kind of in this hybrid coaching role. And every single department head, highly qualified, very well paid individuals, all very talented in their own right. But like you said, it's all alpha males. Everyone has their own opinions, and that can be hard to find cohesiveness with that. You've got these clashing opinions. You got everyone jockeying for control,
And so when you say that's all, I'll chime in. So that's where this leadership. This is why I think when they do these models and they put somebody ahead of things, it's not necessarily a specialist as far as we need a medical model or we need this, or it resonates to that because we talk about injury too much. But the real thing we should be talking about is performance. When you lean on, the goal is for no one to be hurt. Now that's in the NFL, that ain't happening.
Right.
But the ultimate goal is not to have a lot of people hurt. And generally, you're going to have more people not hurt than you are hurt. So why wouldn't you emphasize on keeping them not hurt than worrying about after they've been hurt? So it's like it's about the mitigation of risk or enhancing performance. This is the conundrum I think the NFL and general managers and individuals that are in those positions continue to look at. And you also have to remember this, and I believe this wholeheartedly. I don't care if it's the trainer, the strength coach, the nutritionist, the player engagement coach, the mental health and wellness coach, the sports science coach, or performance analytics guy, and those people ahead. My true belief is for that whole type of model to be successful, the individual who you consider the high performance, we'll just call it high performance manager,
Right.
Make it easy, has to, one, if they're promoted from somebody in-house, has to leave the position they're in. They cannot have 2 heads. Because, like I said, no matter what anyone says, there's animosity floating. They'll work together and they'll do the kumbaya stuff because no one wants to get fired. And everybody's going to go to the staff meeting and love each other up because we don't want to show any dissension to our bosses that never come down to see what we're doing. But the truth is, if someone has 2 roles, they can't be an expert at one. And the whole but if that person has worked on that level, they will have at least the respect from the other people down there because I know, oh, they've been here with us. They know what it's like down here. Like if a nutritionist got it, I've seen her make shakes and half the guys don't drink them or spill them. And
Right.
and they know about the weight room not being cleaned up and the trainers, having to stay here late at night because somebody walks in at 7 o'clock at night with something that pops up when they're trying to walk out the door and now they can't. We've all seen that. So we all know all the bad, not the bad, but the bad things that occur that piss us off. So you can address the elephants in the room. You can address, look, man, we all know this game. This ain't about liking each other. We all know that at some point in time, you're going to close the door and go, F those guys. Just going to happen. And at the end of the day, somebody's got to be able to take the runs and say, I know this is going to happen. I understand this. We're going to work through it. And that's where you begin to hire people that you build and mold and mentor and manage and mediate discussions because you've seen it from here and you have no real stake in this except for making sure all 7 of these or 6 people can work together to make sure that athlete plays as long as they want and as healthy as you can keep them. And then that person can control the whole narrative of, hey, instead of the strength coach, the science guy, the nutrition person, the return to play, the trainer, all running up to the head coach or general manager trying to feed their thoughts to get one up. Yeah, it funnels through one person. That person is the voice of the collective. And I think that would change a lot. People are leaning on different expertise. You don't need a PhD to be a leader. That's part of the problem and why a lot of these have failed. They're bringing in people who work in a lab. Oh, let's all a sports science guy, and he's going to run he's going to be our director of high performance. No, he's not. He's going to be he's going to be looked side-eye by everybody because this guy came from overseas with an accent. Nothing against him. Never stuck foot in an American football playing facility. And he's going to tell us how to coach or how to design programs or what player loads are needed. Hell, we didn't know when we were making player loads up. We didn't know that. These guys from soccer and rugby say this. American football ain't soccer and rugby. And that's why I felt like what Brett Nienaber was doing with us at the Panthers was unique because, like I used to tell people, we got an American football player learning American football GPS. And I thought we had value. I mean, the things that he was able to break down based off of his knowledge and then the help of our people that were our tech support from, and I'll say it was Scott Sports. I'm 100% tell you who it was because they were great. They would come down and help formulate these algorithms and or formulas that had a lot of merit. Like he could tell us how, if where we needed to be successful. And a lot of times he was on point. So those are things that have more, to me, merit than somebody coming in and just telling me, well, these numbers don't match. What are you matching them? It's just like when people would tell me, oh, House, you can't do Olympic lifts at the end of a workout. Why not? Well, that's not weightlifting protocol. Well, I don't train weightlifters. There are no protocols to train athletes. All I know is in the fourth quarter, if they're not in shape and they're not playing explosively, I'm getting them MNF'd. And I don't know how to do that by eliciting responses, by doing fast exercises first. Well, that's easy. And again, when you derive things from the sport of weightlifting, they're only lifting 6 times. And a repetition in Olympic lifting takes way less than 5 seconds. And they're going to get at least a minute rest. So do the rest time ratio to that.
Right.
And in 6 minutes, really, after 3 events, they're warming up for another. So, our guys play 75 plays in 3 hours. They're going to play 6 reps in an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's not the same. The metabolic demands of team sport is way different But yet 99% of the stuff we first read out of a textbook on training athletes was based off the sport of weightlifting.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things weightlifting can help with training an athlete, but there's a lot of other methods and principles that don't factor into being a great weightlifter, that factor into being a great football player, basketball player, tennis player, and whatnot. So these are the things that I think some of the people above us need to rationalize. Their problem is they got so much stuff on their plate, it's a fill in the blank deal. Oh, I'm just going to pass it off to somebody else. I'm just going to pass it off to somebody else. Well, keep passing it off, and then you want to know why you've not had success, and you continue to change coaches or lose your job, because the things that people got to remember is the players control your success. 100%. Players are number one. This is just me, and I live in this world, and maybe I'm biased. But if the players are the most important assets that we have in the building, the next most important asset is the care team. And those people who care for the athlete. Generally, those are all the people who work on the same floor as the locker room.
Right.
The higher you get up, let's be honest with you. Yes, some of those people pay the bills and select the players, but the higher up you go up those levels of floors, the less they have a real ability to affect the kids in the locker room. And I think that's where some people, even former players who move up the ladder, I think sometimes they even forget that aspect of it because they're so worried about, I got to pick the right players, or we got to find the right coaches, or, hey, again, and here's what I'll say. I'll backtrack a little bit on like the animosity and stuff. Come on, man, John, you're going to tell me that O coordinators and D coordinators don't have animosity when one gets the one up? And you know who else who got more animosity to both of those is the special teams coordinator, because he's the same side like an offensive defensive coordinator. So when I say this stuff, everybody's like, oh, he's disheartened, he don't have a job. No, it happens everywhere. You don't think there's animosity between the backup quarterback and the starter, even though they know? I mean, everybody wants to play. Everybody thinks they're better than what they are, and they should. That's why they're in the NFL. You better think you're better than what you are. So I don't like when people say, I'm just telling you, hey, like I've always said, this is my perspective. My perspective is based off of being a high school coach, a college coach, a pro coach, a private sector coach, and working at high-level organizations and universities, and being able now in the role that I have to see it from a consulting basis. Like if I ran my own consulting business, or I was helping an agent vet coaches or vet players or vet different positions in what I'm good at, right? This is just the truth. But the problem is no one wants to admit the truth, and no one wants to be able to look in the mirror and self-criticize their role sometimes in the destruction of relationships, whether it's professional or personal or a little bit of both. And again, when people are out for a power grab, that can deteriorate a lot of things.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that my big takeaways from all that is just like, you need a good leader who's got some of these intangible qualities to keep, on a performance staff, to keep all these people unified. And it's not about putting someone in position who's necessarily got all the academic expertise, the guy from the lab. It's about putting someone with intangible leadership qualities in place who can manage all these personalities, get everyone on the same page, get everyone aligned. I think that's so important. And, just on that track of kind of the intangible stuff versus some of the academic data driven side of things, we touched on the sports science a little bit. Do you think sports science has swung too far in the NFL, in that it's driving too many decisions and training programs are living off of the data a little bit too much? You mentioned taking the strength out of strength training. Do you think that's a result of too big of a swing towards the data and sports science end of the spectrum?
Yeah, I think I don't want to say it's too big of a swing because we were really starting to, me personally, with the information that I was getting from Brett, I was really starting to dig in it deeper from, he was digging deeper into it from how it can affect. I was starting to do my own digging deeper, how it can affect me as a better strength coach.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing that I wish I had more realization of being able to actually be in facilities to really give you a better assessment. But what I think is the swing is we're looking at the data and we're trying to figure out minimal effective doses. And I think that's okay in the weight room because the weight room is just a subsidy of being a great football player.
Right.
Being a great football player means you've got to perform your skill at a level that allows you to perform that skill on game day. And I think with this load management stuff that's come out of basketball, let's just be realistic. If we look at all these people who talk about load management, those are the ones that remain hurt. You cannot manage load and stress during practice and then ask them to play at a higher level in the game. Oh, his knee swelled up in the game. It hasn't swelled up for the 2 weeks he's been practicing. It's because he hasn't been practicing hard enough to show what he's going to do in the game.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing with like certain yardages. That's why you hear some of these coaches being a little bit more critical on like max velocities and speeds. Like, hey, if a guy runs, let's just say, make it easy, 20 miles an hour in the game, we got to make sure this guy touches 18 plus sometimes during practice. To me, that's a smart assessment. But you also got to look at the yardages and the overall high speed running of a game. I'm not saying you have to match it every practice, but somebody's got to be smart enough to figure out if a wide receiver has, and we'll use 80% of max velocity. If a wide receiver has 500 yards of 80% above max velocity running with A cells and D cells in a game, how can we get them from Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to accumulate, let's just say 600 yards, 200 yards a day, or depending on how you practice, maybe it's, hey, let's try to get them 200 yards on Wednesday, 300 yards on Thursday, 100 yards on Friday, depending on how your practice schedule is. If you're one of those teams that's going, walk through Friday and a little bit more up tempo Saturday, you might want to adjust those loads. But how do you, and then what's the magic miles per hour you think you need to reach, and how many reps does that look like during the game? Like, I know, again, I don't know if we were right or wrong. I was just basing it based off of the information we had. But when we had Julius Peppers the last year of his career, he didn't practice much. So how do we get him? And he was a situational rotation player. So it wasn't like he was playing 70 snaps like he did early in his career. He's playing what, 25-ish? So we would go into the weight room and we would look at his miles per hour he was running in the game. And we would pair that with his lower body dynamic effort work. So he would do like 5 sets of runs where it'd be, hey, we're going to do 2 sets of belt squats, dynamic effort. And then he'd walk over, which would be about a 30-second walk. Our room was not that big. So he'd walk over from the belt squat to the woodway and have to run a 5-second sprint at like 17 miles per hour, because that's what the data said he ran his average miles per hour for each game up to that. So I think we were trying to mimic things as close as we could without the contact of practice.
Right.
And then we would do the change of direction stuff as needed. We did a lot of that up front. And with guys like that and his skill set of being there 17 years, he knew what he had to work on Fridays when he was out at practice. So that's my concern is we needed the fact that we have this much data is awesome, because it used to be us tracking stuff, trying to write yardages down like when we would try to track a wide receiver's yardage back in the day during a game, we would write down, but then the most important yardages is the dead yardage. Because when you're subbing out, that's almost more total yardage than the actual yardage overall. Right. When we were with the Panthers, I think Brett, he had to track how much dead yardage they walked to and from practice, because that counts towards fatigue.
Yeah.
We had a decent little walk. And you times that by the whole year, that could have been an extra mile, 2 miles of walking that a lot of teams don't have, that we do. Now, we could, as us, we could call it phantom conditioning, but in the end, when you play 16, 17 games in the NFL, also phantom fatigue.
Right.
Well, again, I think that when people started separating smart and hard, I think that's where things got crazy. I think you can be smart hard, and I thought that's what we were. I thought we did a very good job of being smart hard because I came from 19 years of college. I know what stupid hard looks like. Hell, I helped create some of the stupid hard stuff that college football teams did. So for me, it was easy to understand right off the bat. There's certain things you just don't have to do with an NFL athlete. Like, they know what they need to be prepared at certain levels of time. Like, you talk about guys who really understand, this is where I need to be in March. This is where I need to be in April. This is where I need to be at the end of mini camp. And now it's time for me to ramp up. And like people don't understand this too. And it took me a while to figure this out when I was at college. You're not trying to be in game shape when you report for camp. You're trying to be in shape to recover from the demands of practice. Training camp's going to get you game ready, because no matter how many pattern runs you run, no matter how many playtime reps you try to run, no matter how many simulations you try to run on air, it's not the same as practice. I've always said this. When practice comes in, the stress level goes up because the cognitive ability of learning and reacting changes. And I've said this and I believe this, and I don't think it's changed one bit. And I would like to see you tell me if I'm right or wrong. It doesn't matter what kind of condition a guy's in, and it doesn't matter how many plays that first series of live football is in camp. Everybody looks like they're not in shape after that first drive. Everyone. But it's a whole different ballgame. Football is different like that. I've not been around rugby enough. It's something I'm very intrigued that I'd like to study. I watched enough. I haven't watched soccer at a high level, but I watched a lot of high school soccer because my son played it. But football's different when it's live, no matter how conditioned you are. So for me, the conditioning programs are to how fast can you recover from practice to practice. And in this day and age with the rules, it's a lot easier from the standpoint of there's not a true 2-a-day. When there was true 2-a-days and 3-a-days, that recovery, man, was harder and harder. But in this day and age, where you have to get a day off after several days, and most of the 2-a-day is a big practice and a walkthrough, I think there's a lot more capability for the athletes to recover in a positive. It's like when coaches talk about, oh, these guys are soft, they can never do what we did. Well, hold on now. They're not asked to do what you used to do. There's not a football player that I know of, regardless of what the rules are, that wouldn't adapt to what the rules say. If these guys had to do traditional 2-a-days, these guys would do traditional 2-a-days. And the guys who are prepared mentally and physically and can maintain their high levels of emotional quotient and their stress levels are going to be the same ones that make a team, whether there's 3-a-days, 2-a-days, or 1-a-day. It's just like when parents get pissed off, my kids don't want participation trophies. Well, don't get mad at the kid. It's the adults who created the league that gives out participation trophies.
Right.
Not the kid's fault. If I sign up and it says I get a jersey, I played 10 games, and I'm getting a trophy at the end of the year, I'm expecting a trophy, win or lose. Now, if you tell me I get to keep my jersey, we play 10 games, and I don't get a trophy if we win the championship, then when we don't win, I'm probably crying because I didn't get a trophy. So I think that when we make these assumptions or we talk about certain things about, it's just like when I came up as a coach and even as a player, it was beat them down, like that negative reinforcement, and then build them back up. You hear this guy's soft, this guy's this guy's that. And then when you really look at it, it took me a long year, like decades, before I finally realized these guys aren't soft. They're just not very good football players. You know what I mean? Like anybody who's going to go through mat drills, anybody's going to go through that ridiculous stuff that you do as college football and show up the next day. It ain't that they ain't tough. They're just not very good football players.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, circling back a little bit to a point you made, I mean, no matter how much I conditioned in the off season, no matter how prepared I thought I was, that first practice in pads, you got the coaches out there, the music's blasting, you're fighting for a job, the pressure's on, that psychological arousal is just in a completely different place. You're gassed no matter what. It's a completely different thing when you're actually playing real football. And then also, like, and players and athletes, they're going to adapt to the environment they're in. My first year playing college was the end of the true 2-a-day era. I went through high school. We did 3-a-days. So I went through 3 days in high school. Then my first couple years in college still had 2-a-days. Then that kind of got swapped to a practice and a walkthrough as the 2-a-day. So I went through all those different phases. And no matter what the case was, it always felt equally hard. Whether we were doing real 2-a-days or just doing 1-a-days, it all felt the same because we just adapted to whatever environment we were going through at the time.
And coaches always come back, right? And our strength coaches did a great job. This is the best conditioned team I've ever had. Like every year, your team can't be the best conditioned team. Like here's a fact. When my junior and senior year in college, Bill Dooley came from Virginia Tech, the old North Carolina coach. I always give Coach Dooley credit because Coach Dooley put the ACC on the map, and he came and coached us, and it was the best thing for a lot of us. We saved my career, gave me a college career that I probably wouldn't have had if it wasn't for Coach Dooley and his staff. But here was our conditioning test. Now I'm at this point in time, I'm majoring in health and sports science. I'm all in. I'm going to be a strength coach. So we report the night before we start practice, so to speak, right? Report, get your physical, get your weights. That night, 12-minute run. So, and you got to run it in a certain amount of laps or you flunk. I think O-line was 6 laps. So you got to run pretty much you got to run 2-minute laps, 8-minute mile, regardless of what you weighed. O-line, D-line, 12-minute run. You weigh 400, 12-minute 6 laps. You weigh 250, 6 laps. Done. Now, that was test 1. Now, when I first went to college with Al Groh, our test was a 30-minute consecutive run, 100 yards down and back on a football field for a specific amount of laps. That was 1984. So 1987, 12-minute run, which was traditional back then. Then we woke up the next morning, 5:30, stretch, 880 run, which you guys would know is an 800-meter run for time. Lineman, 245.
Okay.
Oh, you got to smoke. And again, back then, there wasn't a lot of 300 pounds. I don't think my junior year, we didn't have a 300-pounder on the team. We had a few my senior year. Then, a half hour after that, if you passed those first 2, you only had to run 12:40s for time within 0.5 of your, if you flunked one of them, you had to run 16. But the thing on that was you had to pass 12 or 6. So if you missed one, you had to keep running until you passed the number you had. There was guys out there running 30, 40 yards. Now, at that point in time, you just got a dickhead coach who won't give you the time. Like, come on, dude. Like, you're really going to screw this guy? He ran on a hard surface in the fall, and he's running after 2 running tests on grass. He ain't going to run within 5/10 of his 40. But I'm sitting back now, and I'm in exercise phys class, and we're learning about energy systems. And I'm like, there's no way Coach Dooley knew he was testing us at all 3 energy systems.
Yeah.
There's no way. And again, I killed it. My junior year, I ran 6 3/4. I weighed 275. I ran 6 3/4 laps in 12 minutes, 238 half mile, and passed all 12 of my 40s. The next year, I weighed 280 something. I did 6 1/4 laps, 243, and passed all 12. I was in shape, except for the first team period when it was 4 plays and out, and you're like, and we ran tall sweep, so we were running too, and I was like, yeah, man, it's just different. And that's how you conditioned back then. You conditioned with track work. Hey, I can show you my 1994, my first year as the head strength coach at Boise State. We're running 220s, 400-meter run to get in shape, because that's what you did. You followed some of that older track stuff. And, back then it was either the 300-yard shuttle, the 16-110 test, or the Springfield 40-yard dash test. So, yeah, I think the demands change, but the capabilities of the human mind doesn't. It just adapts to what you're asked to do. Some guys are more, like I say, some guys are more conditioned to be leaders as far as when you have a goal time, you have your guys who are always going to look to beat the goal time.
Right.
Always. And then you're going to have your guys, and those are guys are the rabbits, right? Those are the guys they're gone. They figured it out. The faster I get done, I get more rest. Because the rest time's not going to the rest time starts when the whistle blows for the goal time. It's not starting when I cross the line. It starts so if I can get there at 1 second faster for 16 reps, I just got 16 more seconds of rest compared to the guys who don't. And then you got what I call the pack dudes, right? Guys who could probably do better, but if the goal time's 16, they're crossing at 16.
Yeah.
And then I call them the championship guys, because then about 5 or 6 of those will win the last ones. And
right.
To me, that pisses off
heroes.
Yeah, and that pisses off all the rabbits. And then you got your guys who are never going to pass it, because they're physiologically and genetically, they're not that type of guy. Like, generally your fastest guys in the 40 are probably not pass. And again, back then, a 300-yard or a gasser test. But when it comes towards the end and you're running your metabolic game speed stuff, they're breezing through. So that's where you have to learn as a coach. Like, the goal time is parameters, but the individual differences are, hey man, if this guy runs 4.3, he ain't making no 300. He might be walking by the end of a 300-yard shuttle. But again, these are people who believe in building some type of higher capacity anaerobic base to help with the recovery of a 75-play mock game drive. But if you can improve that while maintaining and conditioning for speed, lateral and linear speed within this process, by the time it's the last phase of summer and you're in game action mode, that dude's laughing, because now he's playing at a higher capability of his 4.340 than some of the other guys, because that's who he is. And that's how and that's where I think the GPS and the data of technology really can benefit a college strength and conditioning coach. Like I always said, when that stuff started coming out and I saw total volume of yardage of a practice and then this high speed running number, that's where I said, right away, I said, okay, I was right on a lot of my yardages. People thought we ran a lot, but I was right on my total volume of yardages compared towards practice. But I fell into that same conundrum as most coaches do about every rep's got to be full speed. Every rep's got to be full speed. What GPS showed us is not many reps of full speed.
Yeah, I think they're 90% of the games played under 12 miles an hour.
Yeah, and that's where the term game speed by Tony Villani has really resonated with me. So now I'm looking at it like, okay, this is the number you want to focus on, was that 400 yards of that 5,000 yards that we consider that high speed running of A cell, D cells. And that's where I said, okay, and this is where some of that, where you could still do some types of conditioning, but you could slow down the tempo, because it was really just a filler for recovery. You focus on that 400 yards of high speed running and all your position specific and change of direction work. So instead of running, 16 110s at 12 seconds, if you're a wide receiver, if you really believe in that, now you can do a lower intensity 110 at say 18 seconds, expand the rest time, and now maybe there's a different a conversation instead of the higher demands. I think the biggest thing that strength coaches did that was, I don't want to say harmful, but learning more, was we did a piss poor job setting these goal time rest times for some of these conditioning drills. And that's where I think it fell out of favor, because we were slowing athletes down because we weren't using those types of distances correctly. Like, like even with the longer shuttles, the goal times were too fast for everybody. And you're trying to do so much volume. Well, now you're affecting other demands of other systems you're trying to improve. It's like, and that's why I think, like you saw with, and again, I'm not an expert in Charlie Francis's stuff, but where they have that high-low system, and that low system was those tempo runs. And then the high demand. So they never wanted to sprint in the area which most of the games played at. But that's where we have to decipher that's track and field relevancy, and ours as an athlete relevancy is, a lot of it is intertwined. And that's why I think, like I say a lot, you got to watch out when you start digging too deep into specific sports and trying to implement it. You got to find that sweet spot of where it fits into a total package, because when you're going to tell me don't train in this particular speed area, so to speak, but yet you look at, now what, let's just say 10 years of GPS data in the NFL, and 90% of the time it's conditioning guys are playing in this speed level. Yeah, I understand. If you get faster, then that gap of speed enhances, right? Like if I can get a guy to run from 20 miles per hour to consistently topping off at 22, then his 80% speed's higher.
Right.
Just like if most of football is played, let's just say from a strength level of relative intensity of 85%, well, if I can get his 1 rep max, and again, at some point in time, it's irrelevant, but on the come up, if I can maintain his 1 rep max at this level for 15 years in the NFL, that 85% is pretty solid. Now, if he's not strong enough, that 85% is going to be a deficient for him.
Right.
So where you have to look at it, where I do, because like when people go, how strong is strong enough in a sport player, I think there's certain numbers that are like, hey, anything after that, it's the guy's just a freak. Like,
Sure.
Because it's not really going to affect how well he drive blocks. A lot of it is not necessarily ego. It's for a guy's confidence. Like, I always believed towards the end of my career, before I even got in the NFL, hey man, if an offensive lineman can bench 360, want to bench 4 caddies, I get it, right? Like, you want to go out benching 4 caddies, and if you're stronger than that, that's just cool. But I mean, 350 to 365, and you can maintain that at a quality rep, because the key is then how well can you maintain 85% of that? That's why our tests in college was at the end of summer wasn't based off a 1 rep test or a repetition test. It was based off of a cluster at 85% or better of your 1 rep max for March, because that's what type of strength you needed to display on the field. And we had great success with that. The confidence of our guys were sky high. We had a lot of guys to set new PRs after 18 play drive. So then they're really jacked up, because then the sell is, right, because the number one transferable trait in all team sports in the weight room is confidence.
Yeah.
So if John Heck's a 500-pound squatter, and we go into the summer and we're training and we're doing all cool stuff, and now here come preseason testing in the weight room, and his 85% load is, let's see, 425 is your start weight for your metabolic conditioning cluster, and you're going to do 425 every 35 seconds. It's a 15-play drive. We got to win the game. 2 minutes left. It's a 15-play drive, no timeouts. We got to go however it goes. Well, now chipping away after 5, man. Hey, John Heck's killing it. All right, bump him to 435, 445, 455, 465, 475. Now play 12. John Heck just did 505 for a 5-pound PR. And then 13, 14, 15, he goes 515, 525, 535. I don't care about anything else. I know when John Heck walks out of it, he's going to be like, oh, I'm going to devastate people on the football field this year.
Yeah, I absolutely love that format.
And that's a little bit, but I can show you data where there's a lot of that. I have data that shows guys PRing at that. And I'm like, this doesn't even, and this is where guys who are sports science guys at a high level published, and they're like, when they see this, like, I'm not, first they would tell me that they never thought I could do it. Then when they see a whole team do it, you're like 10 years ahead of the research. And that's why I say a lot of our research is anecdotal. We don't have enough time to process research to get it on published. Like I tell people all the time, I actually wrote this down today because I say it a lot. I mean, I live in the world of anecdotal research, and my evidence-based research is the feedback I get from my athletes, my coaches, my nutritionists, my therapists, my PTs, my athletic trainers, and anybody who has the same realization goals that I do, and that's athlete success. I mean, I'm not trying to be an ass. I've got research papers published in research journals. I do believe there's necessary information out there that is research driven. Like I've told many other people I believe are great researchers in sport, you have to understand your control group has to match my athletes. If you tell me, oh, I did this research with 100 freshman weight training 101 students, and you're trying to tell me I'm supposed to use that with my football team, you got no shot.
Right.
But now if you tell me, hey, we took 100 football players, even if it's Division 2 or 3, because a lot of times you can get it way at those schools a little bit different. That's got now, hey, I'll read that. I'll read that. That has some merit to me. So those are things where I think we have to be more aware. You know how coaches talk about situational awareness?
Yes.
I think that's what strength coaches have to do with data. Situational awareness. Same thing with the velocity-based stuff. Hey, we're going to do a certain amount of sets at a certain load, and our goal is to hit this score. If we don't hit that speed, you're done. No, I need to know what you can do the rest of the way because I'm getting evaluated on that part. I'm not getting evaluated on the first 3 sets. I'm getting evaluated on the last 4 of a 10-rep set. I need to see all 10 sets done, see where you fell off, see how far you fell off, and then that will tell me a lot about the metabolic conditioning and demands that you are willing to do. Like again, if we consistently see this, you can make the argument that, okay, this particular person, if we do over a 6-play drive, his level of strength is going to drop tremendously after 6. You got to get him up, right? You see what I'm saying? Instead of, hey, after 5, he dropped, he's done. No. Again, it's like load management. No, I got to see the work. We've taken the stress and strain out of training also. So the 3 strengths, right? We've taken the strength, the stress, and the strain out of our programming. It's not, it can't, optimal makes sense. When Louis Simmons used to talk about optimal, there's a lot of validity in training optimally in the world of lifting. A lot of value in that. In our world, there's a lot of value in the higher volumes, like in the Prilipin chart world. There's a lot of like optimally, I think it's do I have my chart? I think it's, let's just say it's, hold on a second, 20, it's like 6 sets of 2, 7 sets of 2 from between 80 and 88%. And something like that, 15 reps. But I'm going to do 10 doubles. I'm doing 10 doubles. To me, that matches an intensity level on the football field that I think can prepare my athletes to be successful. and it's going to be, 2-minute rest. It's not going to be 5-minute rest like a power lifter. It's going to be a
Right.
2-minute rest, maybe 3 but it's going to be on a 2-minute turn. You're going to, and we're going to measure speed. And that's the one thing. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry about that, but the one thing I'll say that we missed the boat on in my era of velocity-based training is, I don't know who the first one that figured out we didn't measure enough of the max effort or the sub-max effort loads. We primarily were using tendos for dynamic effort or speed.
Yeah.
And I thought we really missed the boat. Like, that's one thing I said with our metabolic conditioning tests is, man, if I would have had a tendo on these scores, I might have had some serious data to put out there to people, because I don't know if I have any video of it, because I could just remember dudes. I watched the speed of the movement on eyesight from rep 1 to rep 15, and there might have been a 50-pound increase, and I swore it was moving the same. It's like, it would have been that, it's not a regret. We just didn't know what we didn't know. But yeah, I tell you this, if I ever had the opportunity to recommend something, that would be it. Because that's the stuff I want to know. I don't want to know, oh, this guy, get him off. No, I need to see now it's time to work, right? Like, hey man, that's why even like when you were there, we would do the certain prescription, and then we went OTS.
Off the script.
Hey man, the first 4 they got to do. After that, bump them. Let's see where they are in fatigue. And our guys killed it. And all I knew was, these fools are strong when they're tired.
And I think a lot of programs are afraid to do that now. To your point, it's all just what the data says is quote unquote optimal. And I mean, needless to say, I mean, you've always been ahead of your time throughout your career, and you've been a part of and influenced the evolution of strength and conditioning through the years. Let me ask you this. Now that you've been out of football strength and conditioning for a few years, you and we talk frequently, and I know your studying of programming, your involvement in Strongman, working with guys like Brian Shaw, experimentation through your own training. I know that your programming philosophy is probably at its best, if anything. What is working with guys like Brian Shaw, working in Strongman, has that influenced what you would do if you were to go back into a football setting? Like, how has your programming philosophy changed, and what might you do differently in the weight room based on what you know now if you were to go back into an NFL football weight room?
I would definitely do some more cooler stuff with the O lineman in particular. One, because the O lineman, the quarterback obviously is by far the most important position on the team.
Right.
Especially nowadays with the multiple schemes and the run pass options, and how athletic a lot of these quarterbacks have just changed the game. I mean, you used to not have to account for the quarterback in the run game. That's changed the whole defensive coordinator's nightmares, are now that the quarterback counts. I mean, and we saw that with Cam Newton. So, but the O-line controls the game, because the O-line doesn't sub out. Your most conditioned athletes have to be the O-line. That's why it never surprised me, or I was not surprised when we would do tempo runs and we talk about the duration of the yardage. And, I'm not saying the D-line guys duped it, but they always took longer on the walk than the O-lineman. The O-lineman always finished the duration of the yardage faster than the interior D-lineman, but rightfully so. They played more plays. The D-lineman could take more, because generally they're rotating in and out. Some guys are just run down guys. Some guys are just pass down guys. So first and foremost, everything, and again, I worked with the front seven because I gravitate towards those guys.
Right.
I worked with them because the way that our staff was set up, it was the best way to split us. Was, I'll take the bigs, Brett Neighbor, you take the level 2s, which was our linebackers, tight ends, and then Gooch, because Gooch had studied a lot through his golfing of more of the movement stuff and some of the little intricate stuff that we like, the TRX stuff and the stuff like that that was an easy move. Hey, Gooch, you got Cam and you got the outside the box. And then our interns filled in where we felt they best suited us to be successful. But with the old line, a couple of things I would tell you, and I mean this wholeheartedly. And again, this is where it sucks because you don't have them all the time. But 13-inch sumo deadlifts for dynamic effort, 100%. 100%. Sandbag carries, 100%. Throwing for height, 100%. Those would be the three biggest things. And again, the sumo deadlift more because we used it for Brian in recovering from his hamstring, and because of the hip mobility work that I feel you can get. I don't think that the O-linemen need to pull from 9 inches. I think if we pulled dynamic effortly from 13 inches with a wagon wheel or the big Rogue 70s, I had played around with sumo pulls with the safety squat bar in like early off season with a few guys. And I thought there was merit there, being away and watching how when we had to rebuild Brian's hamstring, we spent a lot of time on sumo pulls and shoulder elevated hip thrusts. We were doing some of that anyway, but I would have done more of that stuff because it is non-axial loading, and I think it has extreme benefit to offensive line play and even interior defensive line, but more conducive to specifying the offensive lineman right now. But the throwing for height for all the linemen for sure. Like we do a lot of the med ball throws for horizontal distance, the overhead throw. But, when we talk about like legitimate triple extension, throwing sandbags for height would be something. And it's funny because we were throwing kegs for height in 1996s at Arizona State. Like I had already was doing that, and you forget. So like there's certain exercises that it's like, man, why did I ever even take that one out? Like, how did it just fall out of play? And then you start to really watch, because when you watch again, the strongest men in the world from a strength standpoint, some of them are more athletic than you think. And when you watch the propulsion of this, especially in a game where, I guess we could find another spin in them, where propulsion's important, coming out and engaging into another human body out of your stance. Now, again, more horizontal than vertical. It's the same thing. My biggest objectives would be, how many different angles can I get a lineman to extend his hips? And I think we were doing some. I think I'd be a little bit more aggressive with a little bit heavier sled pushes for minimal yardage, like 5, 8, 10 yards instead of more like a 10 to 20 yard work. Those would be, people may laugh, log, climb, and press.
Yeah.
Because of the, and that might be even more for a D lineman because of as when you lap the log, the amount of quasi-isometric hold you've got to get it into your like upper gut to explosively roll into the upright position. I think there's some merit in that. And the other thing is it's a safer movement in some ways. Again, we don't have to we're not doing 400-pound log press. I'm talking more of almost like a dynamic type of move. Lap it, explode, pause, punch. I believe in overhead press work because I believe in vertical pressing. Depending on shoulder health, we all know O-line and shoulder health is critical. That's one of the reasons why we didn't do a tremendous amount of axial loaded squat work, not because it was a lot of it. Yeah, guys are finicky in the NFL, as you know, with putting stuff on their back.
Yeah.
Well, with the linemen in particular, my situational awareness was the amount of load and external rotation on the shoulder. That's one of the reasons why we did so much barrel ball work was, hey, we're going to do our full range of motion with dumbbells. We'll do our heavier presses with different barrels because again, that's where most of the punch is anyway. Everybody's like, oh, you got to do full range of motion bench. But if you watch quality offensive line and defensive line play, they're not engaging by rolling their hands are out here, out in front of their chest, but when they're striking. So that's where, again, we were doing a good job of it, but more real understanding now by even some of my own training and then training with the strongman of direct tricep work, because that's the key to lockout. Like people get generally younger athletes when they miss it, they got to get their chest stronger or their shoulders stronger. But generally where they hit the mini max or the sticking point is where the triceps take over. And yeah, you may have big arms because you've been doing your push downs, but push downs is a shaping exercise for triceps. It's not necessarily what I consider a strengthening exercise for triceps, where you have your closed grip benches and your extension work. Most of your cable push down work to me is for game day. Like dips, if your shoulders are healthy enough to do dips, obviously that's a monster one. But like easy bar extensions at all different angles, dumbbell rolling extensions, dumbbell elbow out extension, neutral grip, closed grip benching. But we were doing that anyway, so that's why I didn't feel like we had to do traditional closed grip work, except when the guys would come in on player's choice and we do the tricep press for death, where we do all more different. But even then, that's in the triceps at different ranges of motion, because not every time are you perfectly going to be set here. You might be punching out here, you might be punching, but we were continuing to work that. So those would be the biggest. From a skill standpoint, I thought we were way ahead of the game. We understood how to utilize the single leg parameters and the single leg exercise pool. I did really give a lot of kudos to a lot of our guys towards the end of our tenure there, that a lot of the skill guys, especially during that 8-week plan from April to June, they resonated a lot to the safety bar front squat. I mean, that was a key to me. That was a game changer for us when we finally committed to doing that full time. How many of our upper veteran athletes who were already shying away from squatting and going more towards your belt squat and in some cases even a leg press, that were like, I'll do that. And I'm like, you'll do that? I said, bet you do that. I'll be like, okay, you do that for me during this time, we'll be doing belt squats during the season. And we think, the belt squat, again, I won't talk companies. You find the right belt squat that has the right loading parameters, that is a highly efficient way to save your athletes in the season, still be able to bomb some serious squats. And I have two distinct models of belt squats that I really prefer, and I would have both of them in my facilities, whether I trained athletes, strength athletes, because I think they're both, from a lever standpoint, they're very conducive to exposing people no matter how strong they are, and they're totally different where I can cycle them on and off. And I think they have a lot of transfer to your standard squatting. A lot of the belt squats don't. And that's where you lose some people with leg strength, is you think you're mimicking a squat pattern and you think that you're getting them pretty close to what a pure front squat or back squat can do for them. But because the leverage is off, and now, and like in the business I'm in now, working for an equipment company, I try to train on as many different companies' pieces so I can give an honest assessment to coaches when they ask. I think too many people try pieces and say, oh, this piece sucks, or this piece is great. Hey, man, train on it, sweat a little bit. What one set with a 10 doesn't give you a good, I mean, you've seen me in the training hall. I'll go to all the different equipment companies and say, okay, I'm going to be over here to do these machines over here. And I'm going to hit these machines in our booth, and then I'm going to go bang out some over there. And I'm putting a load that's conducive enough to me to know that that piece is pretty. I rate pieces very specifically, especially upper body. Has to be bilateral, and the least amount of weight I need to put on it, the better the piece is. Because then somehow, some way, the mechanical advantages of that piece are dialed in. That's where I like when Arthur Jones came up with the knotless piece. It is the closest piece of getting a pure strength. There is no give or take. Like, when you get to lock out at a lot of pieces, it becomes easier. That knotless curve, that curve of that seashell is dialed in. I was just on 2 pieces again today, and it's this. Sometimes you shouldn't change what works.
100%. And, you're talking about the machines. Well, first of all, let me just say, I think you're spot on with incorporating some of those strongman exercises, particularly for O-line. When I moved on to strongman as a lifter myself, I thought to myself, God, there are so many of these exercises that would be transferable to the line of scrimmage in football, whether it was for GPP and conditioning, top end strength, explosiveness, like you said, the sandbag throws. I think that's such a great tool for triple extension. And guys love that. They get competitive with it. There's a low learning curve. If you're throwing a 50-pound sandbag over a 15-foot bar, I mean, that's explosive. And then all the interior loaded stuff. You mentioned the sandbag front carry. And then, of course, your log clean and press, front squatting. I love that interior loaded stuff. Doing so much of it in strongman, I see so much potential transfer over to O-line play. But talking a little bit more on the machines, I got one more topic for you, and then I'll wrap this up. We've almost got an hour and a half already. We could go another 3 hours in this stuff. But I just want to talk a little bit about college strength and conditioning. We did a live stream the other week where we talked a little bit about, has the transfer portal negatively affected the physical development of athletes as they transfer from program to program. We kind of talked about, hey, these guys, they come in, they've had no continuity. They haven't been slow cooked multiple years through one program. The new strength staff gets them. They have no idea what they're capable of. They only have a few months with them. Then they might be either transferring on or going to the NFL. You talked about something I thought was interesting, which was potentially incorporating some HIT work with some of these guys who are transferring in from an outside program and utilizing machines. Can you speak on that a little bit? Because I thought that was a really good insight.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that I got exposed to a lot of different ways to train early. Um, my dad was several years younger than the legendary Kenn who went to my high school, so I understood. I saw that crazy stuff back then. I mean, Kenn was really the first hybrid HIT guy. He would do the big lifts because he was a huge powerlifting aficionado too. But they do the big lifts, and all their accessories was one set to throw up. Like, I've got videotape of him training his wife on a knotless compound leg, and she's doing leg extensions, throwing up in the damn garbage bag. I'm not condoning that, or back then that's what it kind of was. It was one set to failure, and most people thought failure meant you had to puke. But my thought is, and again, and that's where, like, even to this day, I consider myself, as a training philosophy, I call it a hybrid HIT. We never really did HIT type work in the accessories. I felt that way more because I was a mix of free weight and machine. When I came up, you were either free weights, which meant Olympic lifting and powerlifting, or machines. There was one or the other. Like, that's how most of the programs were. If you lifted 3 days a week in the 90s, you were supposedly an HIT all machine team. If you lifted 4 days, you were on a 4-day split upper lower body with Olympic lifts on the front end. And I was exposed to a combination of that at my high school because my high school coach played at Virginia Tech. His college coach was at Maryland at the time, and he had some friends that was at Penn State. So we literally, when I was in high school, I didn't know it at the time, but we were a hybrid HIT team. Like, we squatted, benched, and deadlift, and did some overhead press free weight stuff. But then really all of our accessory work we had was like do 1 to 2 sets of failure. And I didn't, I mean, I'm just doing what the coach told me. I wanted to play high school football. And then later on, you realize, well, that's high intensity training and this is powerlifting, so to speak. We didn't do any Olympic lifting at that time in high school. When I went to college, our high school strength, well, our college strength dish, we had the old full line of Nautilus. He was a high intensity based practitioner who was forced to do some of the Olympic lifts because the coaches mandated it. Now, as we all know, very rarely does coaches actually come in the weight room. So very rarely did I actually do an Olympic lift. But I mean, I can honestly say I may have done a clean 5 times in 5 years of college. Now, when Bill Dooley got there, we did do push jerks and split jerks, but really our coach, because he was a HIT coach, back then the big TV show was the Superstars, where athletes and movie stars would do like events, and one of them was the split jerk. And we go, hey Joey, how do you do a push jerk? He goes, remember Superstars that was on last night? Do that. So that's how we learned technique. But we squatted, we benched, we overhead pressed, but we did the full Nautilus circuit. I mean, we had the whole gauntlet: hip and glute, leg press, leg extension, leg curl, calf raise, pull over, compound shoulder. I mean, our neck circuit was, you started every day on neck. It was, how did it start? I want to make sure I started right. It was shrug. We had the seated Nautilus shrug. Then we go 4-way neck, rear Nautilus rear delt, and then Nautilus manual neck. That started every friggin' workout. You went in the weight room, you started with neck. Then you did your free weight movements of the day, whether it was squat and bench or whatever it was. And then, like I said, I don't remember anybody doing the hang clean part. And then you ran the Nautilus circuit. And you ended on negative chins and dips. So, hey, I didn't know any different. And then as I got resonated, Joey was really cool. I resonated in the weight room. So we were always allowed to do extra. Wasn't no big deal back then. They were just happy we wanted to be in the weight room. Well, some of us, a lot of them, back then, it was mandatory, yet you really didn't get in trouble if you didn't do it.
Right.
Summer programs were negligible at best. You went home for the summer. And so for me, my introduction to strength training was kind of a self-taught, learn on my own, absorb from Joey. And then when I'd go home in the summers, I trained with a power lifter. So again, very limited Olympic lifting background through my college career. I get to Boise State. One of our former players, who happened to be one of the best high school Olympic weightlifting coaches to this day in the nation, Mike Conroy, was an ex-alum. He was coaching at Meridian High. He's actually taught me how to do Olympic lifts. And then we had a math professor who lifted in there, Carl Darby, who was a high-level lifter. Those two guys taught me how to Olympic lift. Mike taught me how to program because Mike taught us this is when the USA Weightlifting Level 1 courses were coming out. I got certified in that in 1996, no longer certified in that. And then I did the sports performance coach in 2002 at Arizona State with Mike. So I've known Mike forever. Mike forwarded my push, jump, punch book on teaching to clean the athletes. So I was very lucky that very early in my career, I got exposed to a lot of the disciplines. Plus, my best friend, Rich Politano, who runs Championship Muscle on YouTube, he became a pro bodybuilder, and we trained together like a bodybuilder at Metro Fit 2. So I had a powerlifting coach in Frank Mansueto. My training partner was going to be a pro bodybuilder and wound up, he trained under Bob Gruskin. If anybody in bodybuilder should know, Bob Gruskin back in the day was the dude. Chris Aceto, all these dudes learned from Bob Gruskin, and this was my guy. My buddy was one of his proteges. So I was exposed to all this stuff. And when I got to Boise, I really got fortunate because the strength coach pretty much, I was looking to learn, and I did learn a lot. But he gave me carte blanche with the Olympic sports that I worked with, which were pretty much the entire group outside of track. Coach Jacoby wrote the program. Coach Thompson did basketball and predominantly football. And then I had pretty much the rule of the roost. When I first got there, gymnastics was their coach was kind of doing theirs. As we all know, wrestling's a lot like throw coaches. Wrestlers like to handle their own business. So I was there for support. But I had, I had about 10 sports myself. So I have all this hodgepodge of knowledge or alleged knowledge, right? Like you think you know what you know. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing with it? And then the pure challenge was June Doherty, our women's basketball coach, says, hey, I'm tired of doing the old football program. Not in a bad way, because back then that's what everybody did. There wasn't enough coaches to be strength coach. So, hey, we want to start lifting. Okay, well, we'll just hand you an old football program and go do it. So I had all this understanding. So I built a program based off of everything I knew, and it wound up being a model of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I just, luckily, it all fit. Like all the puzzles that I chose fit. And so I always train this way. So for me, it wouldn't be no big difference. But as you know, in this day and age of how most rooms are set up, it's how many racks can I fit in a room, and free weight, ground-based, ground-based, ground-based. And I get all it. And there's a lot of merit in that. But the truth is, a lot of teams in that early 80s, late 80s and early 90s on both the college and pro level won championships using all machines. And that's why I tell people, we have to just be very understanding of, in the world of sports performance or the world of team sports, there is no right or wrong way. If it's structured and you don't train a sport with a sport, meaning you don't take the disciplines of some specific sports and try to think that that's going to help raise your sport, it's not, because the demands are different in certain things. Like, you have to learn how to sprint. There's a lot of things you can learn from track, but track people don't have to be in shape. They're like lifters. A lot of things you can learn from powerlifting, but there's not an explosive component to powerlifting. There's a lot of things you can learn from Olympic lifting, but maximal strength, they don't really train for maximal strength in the accessory lifts. They do now, but back then they didn't. Bodybuilding is all aesthetics, but lean body mass is important to protect organs and muscle and joints from injury. High intensity training is metabolic conditioning at its finest in the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I learned about tempo and trying to reduce rest times in between the bigger lifts, because you have to build conditioning for team sports. It can't just be happening with running gassers or,
Right.
You don't have to run gassers. Well, I'm saying I can get you in shape. Hell, I'm not saying this but look at Matt Wenning's high volume, what he calls the Wenning warm up. That'll get you in shape. Do that. Try to do that. I've seen it wear people out. That are not in lifting shape. I mean, and it strengthens. It gives your tendons and ligaments good resiliency. So when you look at this and you look at all these people who are just doing free weight after free weight after free weight, that's constant amount of teaching, constant amount of critiquing. And what people have to remember is, hey, I love the weight room, and I think the weight room brings value to all sports. But what we have to remember is this. Before there was ever strength and conditioning for sports, they were still playing that sport. That sport was still being evolved. And if tomorrow they closed every weight room in the world that had involvement in team sports, guess what's going to happen on game night? They're still going to play those sports. So let's get it, don't get it twisted. We help, but they don't need us. You're good at your sport, and that's why you have to be emotionally aware of these athletes when they don't see it as important as guys like us. But what you have to educate them is, what role does the weight room have to benefit them? And it could be as simple as hey man, I just want to strengthen all these areas of the body that could get hurt on the football field. I don't care if you squat. Especially if you're outside the box. Those are your most finicky in the weight room, but those are the ones where you can be really creative. Yeah, they need to be strong. I'm not saying, but there's a difference between training the in-season NFL football player and the little bullcrap 9 weeks we get with them. It's a surviving game. Nobody will care how I train that guy if he's not playing on Sunday. You know that. You
100%.
I could go down the roster of both the teams you work with, and you'll be like, yeah, by the end of the season, that guy was in there once a week.
It's true.
I know. So from that point, it becomes what, and again, in this day and age of play, I always wanted to be player led, not coach fed, but now it's being player driven because they got the money now. Like, you walk in the weight room now, yeah, you got 500, but 3 of your dudes are making 2 million. They still got you. So that's situational awareness. So the game now is, I always say it's the one-up game. How do you get what you know they need without getting into these dumbass arguments over guys like this is bull, because you're going to get more of that. You're going to get more pushback now, whether you're winning or losing, because these guys know if they bounce, or they're making a boatload of money. So the biggest thing is, how do you win? You win by being very, very creative in what you think is needed, and then where you can win the guy over. Where you win the guy over is in, I want to look swole. Where you win is, I know I have to get these 3-4 points across every week. And that's where machines have the benefit of the swole part. And a lot of times, you walk into a lot of these weight rooms today, and we design a lot of them. You got 40 racks and reverse hyper glute ham raises and maybe a couple of pull downs, some neck machines. Well, if you've noticed, John, you've seen the last few years, a lot more of these rack companies are starting to build strength equipment. They're starting to create specific pieces.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a paradigm shift coming. These 40 rack rooms are going to come back to the room that we had at Arizona State in the early 2000s. Drilling 24 racks in the same size square room with 45 pieces of equipment. And you know what? I think we had a mini one of that at the Panthers. We had one area of the room was racks and the stuff we needed to get the work done. And then you go in the back, and it was a second show. And there was a lot of guys by the end of the year had a lot more time in Accessory Central than they did up front. And again, it's a game of durability. So what can you do to make an athlete durable? Improve lean body mass. Does that necessarily have to be in a rack? No. Need to improve overall lower body strength. Probably got to do some version of a squat. You want to build explosive components or power capacity work. A lot of people who believe in Olympic lifts are going to do a variation of Olympic lift. Those who don't are probably going to go outside and do frozen jump at a higher volume than the dudes doing Olympic lift. You got to have upper body strength. People are going to resonate to the bench. As me and you have learned through our strongman journey, I'm going to emphasize more overhead press, especially early on in an athlete's career, because it's shown. If you can press more overhead, your bench will go up. If you increase your bench press, your overhead strength doesn't go up. So what do you think you should? Plus, you press a bar over with 2 feet on the ground, more conducive to athleticism than pressing a guy off you because he pancaked you. So
Absolutely.
There's a lot of, so those are the things that I think that the smart coaches will resonate to, because what you want to do is you want to beat not necessarily the athlete. You want to beat the conversation to the punch. Like, you always want to be one step ahead of where the thing's going. Like, you don't want to be, it's like we were saying earlier, like, if you're not the first, you don't want to be the last, right? So you want to make sure you're ahead of the game. It's the same thing with how the pro level is the pro level. There's only one thing that matters during the season, especially now when the season is if it goes to 18, it's a half a year season as it is with preseason games. There's only one thing that matters in the weight room in the NFL. Get that guy to Sunday, no matter how it takes. If it takes 3 days a week lifting, it takes 3. It takes 2 days a week lifting, it takes 2. If it takes 1 day of lifting, it takes 1. If it takes a half a day of lifting and he's in there getting stretched or, doing Pilates or whatever the hell it is, it doesn't matter. Your job is have that guy with the biggest gas tank he can have for Sunday for week 1 through week 18 through the playoff. College, little different. They're going to lift, depending on what your coach's philosophy is, they're going to lift 2 to 3 times a week minimum. My world, you're lifting 3 times a week if you're a player. If you're playing and you're a starter, you're lifting 3 days a week. What does that look like? It's going to look a lot different nowadays because, and again, you have to be aware of it. I will say this too. I'm going to coach hard. My heart is a lot different now. After 9 years in the NFL, after 5 years of being an observer and knowing how the player has evolved as far as he's an employee now. But I'm going to coach hard because I believe this. If a guy's going to leave my program because we worked him too hard in the weight room, he ain't helping me win on Saturdays anyway. So what do I care if he leaves?
Right.
If a guy wants to get paid, I always felt like if I went back to college, and maybe this is arrogance, that the fact that I was a 9-year head strength coach in the NFL would help me in this era.
No doubt.
I'm like, hey, man, you can transfer all you want, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Those pro scouts are going to listen to me more than somebody who didn't go work in the NFL. So
if those bulls at my alma mater are thinking right now under Bill Belichick and his crew.
Yeah, I mean, why would you, if you were a guy who, when Mac Brown was removed from his job, was thinking about jumping in the portal and was an NFL caliber player, why would you leave now?
Exactly.
Why would you leave now? And then if you're a guy who thinks he's an NFL player and was going to go in the portal, why wouldn't you go to Carolina?
Exactly.
I mean, now, will his personality and methods, will that be college? That's yet to be determined. But right, if I think I have any opportunity to play in the NFL, I got to consider Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how that plays out, but I can tell you this, everyone's going to be watching. And as a former Tar Heel, it's pretty cool for me to see UNC football in almost every sports media headline. And I mean, all these guys, everyone wants to know, what's Bill Belichick going to do? These guys were thinking about jumping in the portal. We saw a lot of guys retract their portal entry. They're staying at Carolina. Transfers are flocking to Carolina now. So it's an exciting time.
One thing that I want to see, because, we hear about how Bill is and, how Coach is about being very on top of stuff. College is different than pros. I want to see, especially for an individual like yourself, are you going to be welcomed on campus to watch practice?
I'm curious.
I'll
be finding out in a few months.
Yeah, I mean, Julius Peppers, of course, right? But what about John Heck, the guy who didn't play in the NFL but started 55 games? What about that guy? Or what about, Pat Crowley, who was a 3-time All-ACC guy when I was there, who in some ways is a legend at Carolina. Up until that, before the bowls changed, Pat started 45 games out of 45 games that he could play in at Carolina. That, to me, that's a Hall of Fame career as a Tar Heel player. How is that guy when he shows up for practice? Is he going to have to beg for a pass? That's the stuff I want to know. Because, hey, it even happens in years that I've been at Wake Forest. There were some years with coaches I felt more wanted or more able to go over with my background as a 2-year starter with no NFL experience versus other coaches where it's you almost felt like they didn't want anybody around whether you played in the pros or not.
Yeah, and my dad over at Notre Dame. So my dad, for those of you who don't know, my dad played at Notre Dame. He played 12 years in the NFL. He was with Notre Dame when they won the '88 national championship under Lou Holtz. I mean, I'm not going to name names of head coaches, but there's been times over the years where he was more welcomed there on campus at practice under certain coaches than others. So it's interesting to see how certain coaches run that aspect of the program. And trust me, when I move back to North Carolina here at the end of March, I'm gonna be testing those water. So,
Those good, man. Hell,
well,
plus you put blood, sweat, and tears in there as a player. Then what'd you work there total? 5 total years?
5 years as a strength coach. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a lot of vested over there.
Yeah, I know. So I'll be seeing if I'm welcome. I'll be definitely venturing over there with the wife and baby boy. But listen,
Use the baby to your advantage. They're not going with the bed.
they can't turn me down with a newborn in my arms. Um, but anyway, listen, House, we're coming up on the 2 hour mark. I'll wrap this up. First of all, I really appreciate you doing this. I mean, like I said, you were an immense mentor to me, and then over the years we've become close friends, and you're someone I continue to learn from and just love picking your brain. I think you're such a powerful voice in our industry. So I hope everyone in my audience, whether you're from the sports performance side of things or not, you're able to have some good takeaways from this whole thing. So House, where are you doing right now? Where can people find you?
I am predominantly an Instagram junkie, so I'm at Big House Power. Website needs some cleaning up, but bighousepower.com. Like I said, me and John have talked about we're going to do some collaborative stuff. We're going to try to keep that IG live stream rolling at least once a month, and we'll flip flop channels so each of us can host. And I've got a couple of surgeries coming up. I'm in a whole different aspect of training. I will have an announcement shortly. I did join the coaching staff of a high level strongman about a week ago. That'll be I'll let him make the call out, but I'm excited to be working with his team. Um, I think that knowing who is already on the staff, that I'm going to learn a lot more about training high level strongman versus the team sport athlete. And I think what I can bring to the table from the performance side was going to put this guy into an opportunity to go from what I would consider right now a top 15 to chasing podiums in the near future. So, and then most of you who follow me already know that, again, I'm still on Brian's team, and we are going to be launching the Shaw Elite app as soon as we continue to work on the certain aspects behind the scenes. Brian is building an app from scratch. It's a lot different than most people do. So we are patiently working with the app developers to do that. And that'll be with myself, Brian, Nathan Payton, and Kerry Shaw will be doing a lot of work with us on the programming. So that's going to be super cool. And besides that, I'm doing, I'm going to probably have to start my own podcast because, like John said, I'm on everybody else's and probably should start my own. And then, the big thing for me is I get to, I'm extremely, I'm not going to apologize for putting myself in the position I'm in now. I put 33 years in, 365 days, and a lot of hours of not being around my family, a lot of sacrifices from that. But I knew what I wanted to accomplish to make sure my family was right. So now I'm in a really unique position to work for a company that my job is to go to events. So I'm very in the now. Like I'm at numerous events, any major strength and conditioning conference for coaches in the United States. I'm fortunate to be a part of those. The local, regional. I mean, just last week I was at New Orleans for the National Strength Coaches Association's Coaches Conference. Then I'm at the American Football Coaches Association Conference. And then I'm at the Ohio State Clinic for the National High School Strength and Conditioning Coaches. I'll be speaking next week. I'll be down in Wofford attending the Wofford Clinic. The week after that, I speak in Pennsylvania. I speak 5 or 6 times this year. So I'm very fortunate to still be hammering away in the field, just now in a different role and serving the best I can as a mentor, and somebody with a lot of experience who's not afraid to share, so that some of the kids that are coming up, and most of you, if you're younger than me, I'm just going to lump you as a kid, know some of the history of the profession and career you chose. So very, very, I'm in a really good spot. I mean, that, you know how my days go. Uh, and so but like anybody else, you never know where the stone's unturned and the right person lands, and you get a call, and then you got a huge decision to make. And I think again, there's multiple roles that I could serve now for an organization or a university. It just has to be people driven in the right way, and then surrounding myself with quality level people that hopefully I can learn from first, and they can learn from me second.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see how things unfold for you over the coming years, with your own competing training on the platform, with your involvement in strongman and strength sports, with your presence within the private side of strength and conditioning and the equipment world. And then who knows what the future might hold on the football end of things. You never know. But either way, greatness is going to follow you wherever you go, as it always has. And I appreciate everything you've done for me, for the profession. And you were a big supporter in my transition out of football and into the private side of things. You were someone I consulted on it, and I value your input and support. And it means a lot that you did this podcast for me.
Oh
So,
no, man, no, that was a non-issue.
yes, sir.
Hey, John,
Well,
I'm proud of you, man. I mean, I know I'm not your dad, and I know your parents are, but man, you took criticism. You, I saw the biggest thing. You and one other intern came to me like super raw, and to watch both of you evolve into people that he's in the military, and then you coming through your journey to be a university and a pro strength coach. You should pat yourself on the back, because a lot of people wouldn't have invested or committed themselves and learned the way you did and were willing to work for. I mean, like me and you've talked about your time at Carolina and how high regard you hold Coach Hess and what you learned over there, and then your time with the Texans, and then in particular the biggest, to me, there's no doubt, and we talked about this, the biggest growth for you, and I think this was probably what gave you the additional confidence to know you could go out on your own, was working at Troy, where you were in a pure leader. You were in the second in command role. That's a leadership position, and you were able to really show your stuff, because as you know, when you're in those other levels, you can show a little, but you really can't figure out, do I really got this thing down? And I
right.
feel by watching and talking to you of your year at Troy, that really put you over the top, and you're going to just dominate the private side, that's for sure. And I know you got some cool personal goals that you're going to be doing soon, and I can't wait to see it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And, this past year, Troy, it was huge for me. It was huge for my growth as a coach. I got to shout out the director of performance over there, Coach Daryl Bauer. He supported me. He empowered me. He put me in a very big role. And I grew very much from it. And now, just with a newborn, with some of my interests outside of football, my just love of the iron game in general, it was the right move for me to step into the private side of things. And like you said, I've got my own, I'm able to allocate a little bit more time to some of my own training and nutrition now. So we'll see what ends up happening with me competitively. But anyway, House, I'm gonna let you go here. I appreciate you doing this. Everyone go check out Big House Power on Instagram, on his website. Go check out some of his other podcasts. There's an immense wealth of information he's put out there. He's a published author. Anyway, he's been such a monumental figure in the world of strength and conditioning. So, House, thanks for doing it.
Peace.